Hey everybody, it's John the Other here. And I want to talk very briefly today about the mission drift of conservative traditionalism or traditional gynocentrism into the so-called men's rights movement. I had a conversation a couple of days ago with a group of other MRAs. I don't even think of myself as an MRA anymore, by the way, of their rationalization, and they were arguing with me, in favor of allowing the traditional conservative family model as a viable path for male self-actualization. Now, to me, that sentence that I just said sounds like a contradiction, but to them, it's like, well, if this is what they choose and it makes them happy, then, you know, we should pat them on the back and send them on their happy way. The problem is that in the traditional conservative or traditional gynocentric model, the male role is an assigned role. It is, you are the protector and provider, and if you should refuse or fail to fulfill the obligations of that role, not only do you lose esteem, you lose your identity as a man. That's a shit deal. It's a gynocentric deal where your identity hangs in the balance of being able to perform, you know, a lifetime of service for somebody else's benefit. And if people are happy in that, well then it's the happiness of a slave who believes in his own chains. But it was very confusing to me why the men's movement would begin to adopt this as something acceptable, when, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, it was correctly recognized as totally toxic to male self-actualization, and now it seems to be embraced. What's going on? I mean, AVFM now has a TradCon media director, when good old Paul, in 2011, wrote an article which could have been addressed to the very same person who is now the media director, calling the TradCon model slavery for men. That's what he called it, and he was right then. So what happened? And I have been unwilling to speculate on the motive for this 180-degree reversal, because the simple version, the simple-minded and easy answer, is that this is a simple trade of, you know, throw away your ethical and moral principles and go for popularity, go for market share, and forget about the mission. Forget about what you are actually doing and what you believe in. Just go for popularity, and we can also tap into a little bit of the political right-wing conservative base that is an established power base. That's the easy answer. I don't think it's the correct answer. The correct answer is actually worse, in a way, although there's some room for forgiveness. The guys in the supposed men's rights movement, who are now saying that traditional conservative model, for men who want that, if that's what makes them happy, we should support them. What they really think is that men are not intellectually and morally capable of stepping out of their programmed, socially assigned roles. They believe that men cannot define themselves because they simply lack the intellectual horsepower to do it. And this is really sad. This is really fucking an indictment for so-called men's rights activists. But I think that's why we are seeing this traditional gynocentrism basically sweeping in like the tide, and this being endorsed by so-called men's rights activists. These guys don't actually believe that men are capable of self-definition, of shedding their culturally assigned role as disposable utility. They think that that's the best they can do, and that's really sad. Now, the fact that the MGTOW phenomenon, and I call it a phenomenon, not a movement, because it's just happening, whether there's leaders, whether there's an agenda, whether there's a goal, it's just a thing that's happening. It's a phenomenon, not a movement. That's my view anyway. The fact that it exists refutes this belief in men's inability to self-define. But that's a separate argument. We'll leave that alone for now. Anyway, those are my thoughts. That's why I think there is this emerging mission drift towards a traditional gynocentric model for the family within the apparent or former men's rights movement. Thanks very much for watching, and have a lovely day. There's going to be a couple of addendums here, because while I was doing the editing, I also watched a video by Stardust, which was excellent, no surprise there, called The Battle Within and Without. I'll link to that. But I'm addressing a couple of comments on that video, which are specifically comments about me. The user called The Game 346 he's addressing Stardust because it's on Stardust's video. He says, "Being fair, Stardust, Christina Horner, although I think he means Christina Mendez, was tossed out on her ass for opposing MGTOW and libertarianism. This is correct. I don't believe A Voice for Men has a preference for traditionalism, for MGTOW, or any other way of living life to include political leanings. However, I have noticed that if you have an opinion working for that site that is in stark opposition to the path that some members of the MRM choose to live their lives, you'll be tossed regardless of how they or the members within feel about you if you start advocating dissent to other people's chosen path." He goes on to say, "I like John and continue to stay subscribed. However, it seems to me he let his personal beliefs cloud his judgment and wound up speaking out against people within the MRM that identify with something he opposes." Yeah, traditional conservatism, which used to be part of what the whole site opposed, and there was never a memo of why we should now accept it. I was also critical of people who were very sloppy in their research and, basically doing stuff that was going to expose the organization to ridicule. If you are in support of AVFM kicking out Christina, then John being released for what amounts to the same is not unfair. Well, that would be true, except that what I was doing was trying to preserve the actual mission of the site and the integrity of the site. So, However, that's an interesting, fairly politically sophisticated comment as to why I got thrown out, although it's incorrect. Now, my actual favorite comment is from somebody who calls themselves MGTOW Man, and I think I know who this is. He says, "John was thrown out of A Voice for Men because he was being controlled by a woman who was causing problems, not because of his views on TradCon." Which means your argument, he means Stardust's argument, is based on blissful ignorance. New paragraph. Another thing, Janet Bloom is not a TradCon. Well, she has actually identified herself as not a TradCon. She says she's a neo-traditionalist, which is to say, a new TradCon. The con thing is kind of irrelevant. It's trad-gyne. It's traditional gynocentrism, and she is the new kind, according to her. He continues and says, "She salvages only the parts of traditionalism that aren't gynocentric and dumps the rest." This guy, and anybody watching this who cares, needs to go read her blog. "So you've swallowed the bullshit that was essentially fabricated by a woman moving John the Other's mouth. Yes, I am a puppet for Diana Davison." Oh my god. "The marionette wins again. The one part you got right and demonstrated yourself is that ignorance is bliss." Now this is actually a very funny comment to me, because it's the old John is being puppeteered by Diana thing, which is a really blue pill idea that, a man in any contact with a woman is obviously under her control. This is what actually I got accused of when they threw me out. There was all kinds of talk of me being John and her being Yoko, right? I don't need to actually address the reality or lack of reality of that accusation. But the funny thing is that this guy, one of the things that I know I offended people at AVFM was my insistence repeatedly that MGTOW and marriage were not compatible. Because every time I wrote a MGTOW article, I had Paul going in the comments and saying, "I respectfully disagree with your assertion that MGTOW and marriage are incompatible." This guy calls himself MGTOW Man. Interesting. I wonder if it's the same person writing a book about MGTOW advertised on A Voice for Men right now. Anyway, thanks everybody else for watching, and have a lovely day, even you, Jason.